Welcome to the Sky Commander Flight Brief. It's your mission-ready podcast for drone pilot training and aerial insights across Canada.
From Transport Canada rules to real-world drone ops, we break it down, take you higher, and help you earn your wings. Because here at skycommander.ca, we don't just fly.
It hints there's more to it. It's a masterclass, a deeper level, maybe a philosophy or a community focus, perhaps.
It's definitely intriguing, sets them apart from just, a basic tips show. Skycommander.ca is the obvious next step. Precisely. If you're thinking about flying a drone in Canada, boom, this content is aimed right at you.
Powered by skycommander.ca.
The elite podcast for Canada's drone pilot. Okay, let's get started.
Okay, imagine this. Your drone flying perfectly steady one moment, and then bam, it suddenly lurches sideways, or maybe starts climbing unexpectedly. And this is on a day that seems pretty calm. What are these invisible forces doing? Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the show where we unpack complex topics, break them down to give you the really important nuggets of knowledge. Today, we're diving deep into something invisible, but super critical for anyone flying drones or RPAS, that dynamic world of wind gusts and updrafts.
Yeah, and we've pulled together a really fascinating stack of sources for this one. Everything from ancient nature reading wisdom all the way up to current regulations and some very real-world scenarios pilots face. Our mission for this deep dive, it's to equip you with the insights to not just understand these things, gusts, updrafts, but actually predict them, figure out how to mitigate the risks, and really truly master the air around your drone. You'll learn why these invisible winds matter, honestly, probably more than you think, and how they can mess with everything from flight safety to, the actual quality of your mission data or footage.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Let's start right at the beginning. What exactly are we talking about when we say gusts and updrafts? They sound kind of similar, maybe, but they're distinct, right? And both incredibly important.
They are distinct, yeah. And what's fascinating here is that even pretty subtle shifts in how the air is moving can have these major implications for drones, especially the smaller ones. So a wind gust. Think of it as a sudden, really brief increase in wind speed. Lasts maybe just seconds.
Like a quick slap from the wind.
Exactly, like a quick slap. It's unpredictable and surprisingly powerful. You're flying steady, maybe just hovering, and suddenly your drone just lurches sideways. That's a gust hitting it.
Okay, and an updraft?
An updraft is different. It's an upward movement of air. It's usually caused by, say, the sun heating the Earth's surface unevenly, or air hitting an obstacle and being forced up. Think of it like air rising up like an invisible elevator.
Okay. Like near a cliff face, maybe? Or a hot parking lot on a summer day?
Precisely. And the drone just sort of floats up unexpectedly, even when you're trying to hold altitude. That's an updraft. And then there's turbulence, which is, it's more like irregular, chaotic changes in air movement. Like hitting potholes in the sky. It's bumpy, unpredictable swirling.
Potholes in the sky, I like that. So gust is a sideways slap, updraft is an elevator ride up, and turbulence is just general bumpiness.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. We even came up with some memory aids, if that helps.
Oh, yeah. Let's hear them.
Okay, so for GST, think. Gusts unleash sudden trouble. And for UPDF, upward push drives risky altitude fluctuation tactics. A bit wordy, maybe, but it captures the idea.
Okay, I see. Or you can picture your drone, like on a trampoline in a wind tunnel. Bounce from the updraft, blast from the gust.
Exactly, bounce plus blast. That visual really helps distinguish them.
So putting it all together, what does this really mean for our drones in flight? What are the practical impacts?
Well, gusts can instantly change the drone's speed, its direction, its stability. It might suddenly exceed the drone's wind rating, even if the average wind speed is okay. Or it can cause the drone's flight controller to, overcorrect trying to fight it.
Which could lead to losing control momentarily. Or worse.
Potentially, yes. And updrafts, which you often find near cliffs, tall buildings, or those hot surfaces we mentioned, they can lead to increased battery drain because the drone is fighting to stay down. They can also cause control issues, maybe push the drone up into airspace it shouldn't be in, and they can seriously mess with the accuracy of auto-landing systems.
Right, if it thinks the ground is higher than it is or it gets pushed off course.
Exactly. And always, always remember, gusts can easily exceed the reported average wind speeds by 10, maybe even 20 knots or more. Plus, obstacles like buildings and trees create these little wind traps and turbulent zones near them.
This brings up something really interesting. Before we had all this tech, weather apps, and sensors, people had to rely purely on observing nature to predict the wind, right?
Absolutely.
And some of that sort of ancient wisdom is incredibly relevant for us drone pilots today, isn't it?
It's truly fascinating. If you connect this to the bigger picture, many indigenous cultures, like those right here in Canada, have always understood wind patterns by, as they say, listening to the land. They understood that wind is like a storyteller. It carries messages, signals change. There's a Blackfoot saying, for instance, when the wind forgets its name, be still. It describes that feeling of chaotic, unpredictable wind as a clear sign not to travel, or in our case, not to fly.
Wow. When the wind forgets its name, that's powerful.
Isn't it? They also paid close attention to animal behavior. Birds flying low, insects staying close to the ground, squirrels maybe sheltering instead of being active. These can all be signs that stronger winds are picking up.
Things we might just glance over, but they saw them as direct indicators.
Exactly. And get this, indigenous hunters and navigators would sometimes just close their eyes and feel the wind on their skin. Its direction, its warmth, its rhythm. We actually encourage listeners, try doing that during your site assessment. Just take a moment, feel the air. It adds a whole sensory layer to your awareness.
That's a great practical tip. Using all your senses.
And old-timers, farmers, people living close to the land, they use the feel of rocks and soil. If a rock feels surprisingly hot to the touch on a coolish day, that means thermals are building. Updrafts are likely.
Ah, so the ground is storing heat.
Right. Radiant heat coming off blacktop or gravel parking lots. That's a clear signal of an urban thermal trap brewing. And if you see the morning dew drawing really quickly, that often means rising air is coming.
Okay, these are subtle signs.
They are. Experienced pilots also talk about seeing the whisper before the roar, those little visual clues that a gust is about to hit.
Like what?
Shimmering air above a hot surface, leaves fluttering erratically when everything else is still, grass swirling in patches, maybe even small dust devils forming.
Right, those little whirlwinds.
Yeah. And auditory cues, too. Sometimes you can hear a low whoosh building in the trees nearby before the wind actually hits you. There's some old hanger wisdom. If you hear it coming, you're already too late.
Meaning you should have anticipated it sooner.
Exactly. Preparation, not just reaction. This connects to kite flying, too. Ancient and modern kite flyers use ribbons or streamers telltales to read the different wind layers and anticipate gusts or, thermal lift.
So maybe tie a little ribbon onto your drone controller.
It's a fantastic, simple tip. Seriously, try it. Tie a bright ribbon to your controller or your drone case. It's a free, real-time wind direction and turbulence gauge right there with you.
I like that. Low-tech, high value.
Totally. Even watching campfire smoke can tell you things. If it's rising straight up, then suddenly bends sideways sharply, that indicates an approaching gust.
Okay.
If it's spiraling upwards and then suddenly disperses or breaks apart, that often means a localized updraft or a patch of turbulence just passed through.
It's like nature's own little weather station.
It really is. And here's a mental trick. Try to fly like a sparrowhawk. Train your eyes to look ahead of your drone's path, not just fixate on the drone itself. Anticipate how the geography hills, gaps between buildings, will affect the wind before your drone gets there.
Sort of reading the terrain for wind effects.
Yes.
Yeah.
Pause and observe, just like birds do before they launch or change direction in tricky air. And one more from the prairies, from farmers. The 3 bends rule.
Okay.
If the trees bend, the grass bends, and the pole lines bend, tie it down and wait.
Ah, so multiple indicators across different heights and types of objects?
Exactly. 1 sign might just be a localized puff. 2 means caution. But if all 3 are bending significantly, that signals a serious gust front or widespread strong winds are likely hitting your area.
It's really incredible how these, time-tested observations can complement our high-tech sensors. It's not either, is it?
Not at all. It's about integrating both. The tech tells you the numbers, the observations tell you the character of the wind and what might be coming next. Which leads us nicely into the science, the physics behind the swirl. Let's get into the why these things happen. It's not just random air movement. There's some really interesting physics at play.
Okay, lay the science on us. Why do gusts happen?
Well, wind gusts are essentially these brief, turbulent bursts of energy within the airflow. They can come from a few sources. One is mechanical turbulence. That's when wind flow gets disturbed by physical obstacles, buildings, hills, even just a line of trees. This creates these irregular pockets of faster and slower moving air, which we feel as gusts.
So the wind hitting stuff causes swirling.
Basically, yeah. Then there's thermal turbulence. This happens when the ground heats unevenly. Hotter spots create rising columns of air, and these rising columns disturb the smoother flow of air layers above them, creating bumpiness and gusts.
Uneven heating again.
Always a factor. And you also get really powerful often erratic gusts associated with gust fronts and weather fronts, especially cold fronts. That's where dense cold air is physically pushing underneath warmer air ahead of a storm system. That boundary is turbulent.
And why are these gusts so dangerous for drones specifically?
The main reason is their speed. Gusts can change the wind speed and direction literally in milliseconds. That's often faster than the drone's sensors and flight controller can fully react, leading to that lag or overcorrection we talked about.
Okay, that makes sense. What about the physics of updrafts, that rising air?
Updrafts, or air on the rise, are primarily driven by convection. Again, it's that uneven heating. Think about dark asphalt versus cooler grass next to it. The asphalt gets much hotter, heats the air directly above it, making that air less dense.
And less dense air rises.
Exactly. It rises, and cooler, denser air rushes in from the sides to replace it, creating this continuous upward current. Soaring birds are masters at finding and using these thermal updrafts to gain altitude without flapping.
Like riding an invisible elevator powered by the sun.
That's a perfect analogy. Another major cause is orographic lifting. That's simply air being physically forced upward when it encounters terrain, hills, cliffs, even large buildings. As the air is forced up the slope, it often accelerates too.
So wind hitting a mountainside gets pushed up and speeds up.
Correct. And don't forget urban heat islands. Cities with all their concrete and asphalt absorb a lot more solar radiation during the day than surrounding rural areas. They then release this heat slowly, especially in the evening.
Ah, so cities can create their own localized thermal updrafts.
Yes, even after sunset. The concrete is still radiating heat into the cooler night air, generating lift.
So this basic physics, air density, heating, obstacles, how does it translate directly into what our drones actually experience up there? Why are they so much more vulnerable than, say, a Cessna?
Well, understanding those key concepts is vital. Air density, warm air rises, cold air sinks. Bernoulli's principle, faster moving air has lower pressure, which is why a strong gust can almost feel like it sucks the drone sideways or upwards. Buoyancy, that lifting force of warmer, less dense air, and turbulence, that chaotic random motion. Drones feel these forces much more acutely, mainly because of their size and weight. They're smaller, much lighter, so they have less inertia to resist these sudden forces.
Right, less mass means they get pushed around easier.
Exactly. Plus, they typically fly much closer to the ground, often below 400 feet, which is right where mechanical turbulence from obstacles and thermal effects from surface heating are most intense.
Higher up, the air is generally smoother.
Generally, yes. Manned aircraft spend most of their time in those smoother layers. Drones live in the boundary layer, the messy part near the surface. And crucially, drones rely solely on their sensors, GPS, barometers, IMUs, to understand their position and orientation.
And those sensors can lag or get confused by rapid changes.
Precisely. A human pilot in a plane feels the changes through the seat of their pants, intuitively. A drone only knows what its sensors tell it, and those sensors might misinterpret a sudden gust or updraft or react a fraction of a second too late.
This obviously isn't just about understanding the cool physics, though. It's fundamentally about safety, and it ties into regulations too, doesn't it? How has our understanding and the rules around wind hazards evolved in the drone world?
Oh, absolutely. The history of wind awareness in aviation as it relates to drones shows a really clear progression. If you go back to the pre-drone era, say before the early 2000s, wind hazards were very well understood in manned aviation. Glider pilots, helicopter pilots, they lived and breathed wind awareness.
The drones weren't really on the radar then.
Not commercially or widely, no. Wind was seen purely as a pilot's problem to manage, not something you'd program a machine to handle. Then came the early drone boom. Maybe 2005 to 2015, roughly.
When consumer drones really took off. Phantoms, Parrots.
Exactly. Those early popular models, they became widely available, but there weren't really specific wind regulations for them yet. A lot of people were flying purely by feel or maybe just based on basic weather app wind speed.
And I bet there were a lot of flyaways back then.
There were many, many wind-related flyaways and crashes. That period really exposed how even moderate gusts, things a plane wouldn't notice, could easily overpower these relatively lightweight drones, especially those without sophisticated stabilization.
So that learning curve led to more formal rules. rules.
Yes. Here in Canada, the big shift was Transport Canada's formalization between about 2017 and 2019. That's when the current RPAS regulations, CARS Part 9X Canadian Aviation Regulations Part 9 came into force. These rules made things like formal safety assessments and site surveys mandatory for many operations, and crucially, they explicitly required pilots to consider weather, including wind, under rules like CARS 901.27 and the guidance in TP 15263.
What drove that change? Just the number of incidents?
That was a big part of it, yes. A definite spike in reported incidents, plus the rapid growth in commercial drone use. Regulators realized they needed clear expectations around weather awareness for safety.
Okay, so that brings us more or less up to date. What's happened since 2019?
Well, post-2019, we've seen drones get smarter. Many now have real-time wind speed estimations, wind warnings, automated responses like auto-land triggers if wind limits are exceeded.
But the jobs got harder too.
Exactly. The use cases became more demanding. Flying inspections right next to cliff faces, working around tall towers, operating in the complex airflows near wildfires. So while the drones got smarter, Transport Canada really doubled down on emphasizing operator judgment.
Meaning the tech helps, but the pilot is still ultimately responsible for the go-no-go decision based on conditions.
Precisely. The tech is a tool, but the expectation is that the pilot understands the environment and makes the safe call. Drones are smarter, yes, but the demands and expectations on pilots operating in complex environments are definitely higher.
So thinking ahead then, what does the future look like? Where is this trend heading for drone pilots regarding wind?
The clear trend is towards an increased expectation of environmental risk awareness and documentation. You're going to be increasingly expected to not just check a basic forecast, but to actually predict potential risk zones based on terrain and conditions. Using more sophisticated weather tools will likely become standard practice, things like GFAs, detailed METARs and TAFs, maybe even specialized wind prediction models for your specific area. And documenting that you considered wind, especially gusts, will be important.
So more proactive analysis, less reactive flying.
That's the goal. Even as drones become more autonomous, there will almost certainly still be a requirement for human oversight and validation that the environmental conditions, including wind, are acceptable for the planned mission.
And climate change plays into this too.
Unfortunately, yes. Climate change models predict an increase in extreme weather events, including potentially stronger and more erratic winds in many regions. So, this knowledge isn't just important now, it's likely to become even more critical in the coming years.
We might even see things like dynamic geofences, like no-fly zones that appear or change based on real-time wind data.
That's definitely a possibility being discussed. Systems that could automatically restrict flight in areas known for dangerous wind conditions, or when specific gust thresholds are forecast or detected. It's all moving towards integrating deeper environmental intelligence into flight planning and operations.
Wow. Okay, the best way I find to really grasp these concepts is through real-world examples. You mentioned you compiled some scenarios, ones that show how these invisible forces actually play out.
Absolutely. Let's run through a few situations you might encounter. And as we go through them, maybe you at home can think, what would I do in this situation?
Okay, let's hear them.
All right, first scenario, skyscraper surprise. You're doing a rooftop inspection, maybe downtown. It's around noon, sunny day. Your drone suddenly rises about 3 meters, 10 feet, without you commanding it, especially near the edge of the roof. What's happening?
Okay, noon, hot rooftop. Sounds like a thermal updraft from the sun-baked concrete, and maybe wine curling over the building edge.
Spot on. It's likely a combination of a thermal updraft from that hot surface and mechanical turbulence, gusts, caused by wind wrapping around the building's sharp edges. The lesson: be super cautious hovering near building edges or directly over large sun-baked surfaces, especially around midday. Maybe fly a bit higher or offset.
Got it. Avoid the hot edges. Next,
cliffside conundrum. You're out getting some scenic footage near a beautiful ridgeline or cliff. As you fly closer, your drone starts unexpectedly gaining altitude, and it seems to struggle when you try to make it descend.
Feels like that orographic lift you mentioned. Wind hitting the cliff and being forced upwards.
Exactly. That's classic orographic updraft. Warm air might also be getting funneled up the slope, making it even stronger. The key takeaway here is to assume invisible vertical winds exist near significant terrain features like cliffs and ridges. Plan your flight paths offset from the edge and limit how long you hover right in those potential elevator zones.
Makes sense. Plan for the invisible lift. What else?
Okay, picture this. Prairie gust front. You're out surveying a large farm field, miles from the nearest town. Mid-mission, your drone suddenly tilts hard, maybe picks up speed unexpectedly sideways across the field. The local weather report seemed okay.
Nothing obvious nearby. Maybe a gust front from a storm further away.
That's a very likely culprit. Gust fronts from distant thunderstorms can travel well ahead of the actual rain, arriving much earlier or faster than forecast sometimes. The lesson here is to look beyond just your immediate local METAR. Check forecasts for areas upwind. Build bigger wind margins into your geofences and your return-to-home planning, especially in wide-open areas where these fronts can roll in unseen.
Good point. Think regional, not just local.
All right, here's a sneaky one. The quiet killer urban heat trap. You're doing some night photography, maybe capturing city lights. You're hovering near a rooftop edge around, say, 9 p.m. Your drone slowly starts gaining altitude, even though you haven't touched the controls.
Wait, at night? But the sun's down. Oh, wait, the urban heat island effect. That stored heat radiating off the building.
You got it. Concrete and asphalt release that stored daytime heat slowly into the cooler night air, creating gentle but persistent updrafts. The lesson. Updrafts don't necessarily stop when the sun goes down, especially in built-up urban environments. Be aware of these thermal microclimates near buildings, parking lots, even after dark.
That is sneaky.
Yeah.
Okay, keep them coming.
How about the narrow wind snake in the valley? You're flying low along a hiking trail or maybe inspecting vegetation in a shallow valley or coulee. Suddenly your drone lurches sideways quite violently, even though it felt calm just moments before.
A valley. Could the wind be getting funneled or squeezed through the terrain?
Precisely. That's often a localized terrain-channeled gust, sometimes called a wind snake. The air gets constricted by the valley walls or even a dense tree line, and according to the Venturi effect, it speeds up significantly in that narrow channel. Lesson. Wind gusts can be incredibly localized near terrain. Topography can amplify speed dramatically. Be acutely aware of crosswinds when flying in valleys or near channels.
Wind snake. I'll remember that one.
Okay. The false calm behind the barn. You're doing an agricultural inspection. You decide to launch on the downwind side of a large barn because it feels nice and sheltered there. But as your drone climbs up past the height of the barn roof, wham, it gets slammed sideways by the wind.
You launched in the wind shadow created by the barn.
Exactly. That calm area behind the obstacle hid the true wind speed that was flowing just above it. The lesson is critical. Leeward zones, the downwind side of obstacles, can give a false sense of calm. Always try to ascend vertically, straight up, in potentially gusty areas to get clear of low-level obstacles before moving horizontally into the main wind flow.
Good safety practice. Get above the turbulence zone first.
Right. Let's bring it home with a couple of specific Canadian examples. First, a Chinook liftoff in Calgary's southwest. Say it's January, you're doing a roof inspection during a Chinook wind event. As your drone gets up to maybe 40 meters, about 130 feet, it starts wobbling badly, seems to overcorrect its stabilization, and then gets yanked backward by a strong gust near the roof line.
Chinooks. Warm, dry, notoriously gusty downslope winds, right?
That's them. Chinooks create very unstable air, rapid pressure changes, and significant mechanical wind shear, especially as the wind interacts with buildings near the ground. Lesson. Chinook conditions mean extreme instability and erratic, powerful gusts are likely. It's almost always best to defer flights during active Chinook events. The risk is just too high.
Makes sense. Don't mess with a Chinook. How about Lethbridge?
Okay, wind funnel in Lethbridge's coulees. You're filming a dramatic, cinematic fly-through, descending into one of Lethbridge's deep coulees. The drone flies perfectly fine out in the open above the coulee, but as soon as it starts descending into the coulee itself, it gets whipped sideways.
Similar to the valley wind snake. Wind getting squeezed and accelerated by the coulee walls.
Exactly. The wind funnels through the coulee, compressed and accelerated by the terrain. Plus, you get rotor wash turbulence bouncing off the nearby walls. Lesson. Coulees are notorious crosswind traps. Always test the wind behavior at multiple altitudes within the coulee before committing to complex maneuvers or flying close to the sides.
Test the waters or the air carefully.
One last one. Waterfall wind shear at Lundbreck Falls. You're doing a scenic flyover of the falls. As the drone passes near the plume of falling water, it suddenly drops maybe 2 meters, then pitches up sharply.
Falling water must create some weird airflow.
It absolutely does. The massive amount of falling water drags air down with it, creating a localized downdraft and a very turbulent shear zone where that downward flow meets the surrounding air. Lesson. Avoid flying directly over or very close to large waterfalls. The intense downdrafts and mist can confuse barometric altimeters and cause sudden, unexpected altitude changes or control issues.
These scenarios really drive it home. It's so much more than just the average wind speed on a weather app. These localized, often invisible phenomena are everywhere.
They really are. And just checking that single average wind speed number often isn't enough to keep you safe or guarantee a successful mission. You have to read the environment.
So that raises the big question. How do we actually proactively prepare for this? And how should we react when we encounter these conditions? What are the must-knows?
Okay, let's boil it down. Must-know number 1. Gusts are sudden, brief increases in wind that exceed the average speed, and they're often what destabilize drones. Remember the slap, not the steady push. Must know 2. Updrafts are vertical currents, usually caused by surface heating or terrain forcing air upwards. Think elevators. Must know 3. Key conditions to watch for include hot surfaces, asphalt, dark roofs, cliffs, large buildings, hills, and generally the mid to late afternoon on sunny days when thermal activity peaks. And must know 4, from a regulatory standpoint here in Canada, CRA's 901.27. It states you must operate your RPA safely, and that explicitly means considering all weather conditions, which absolutely includes wind gusts, not just the average speed.
Okay, so know the definitions, know the triggers, know the rule. How do we interpret this stuff in practice when we're out there?
It comes down to developing your observational skills. Learn to recognize those environmental signs we talked about. How are the trees moving? Are flags snapping sharply or just fluttering? Can you see shimmering air over hot ground? Try to visually identify potential updraft zones, those south-facing slopes getting direct sun, the big parking lot, the downwind side of a tall building. Choose safer altitudes and flight directions based on what you see and anticipate. Maybe fly higher to avoid ground turbulence or approach a building from the upwind side. And crucially, know your personal limits and your drone's limits, and be ready to abort the mission if conditions exceed them or even just feel sketchy. Don't push it.
What about key numbers? Are there rules of thumb?
Good question. Remember that gusts can easily exceed the average wind speed by 10 to 20 knots, sometimes even more. Convection, that thermal updraft activity, generally peaks in the mid to late afternoon. And the big rule of thumb for safety. If your drone manufacturer states a maximum wind resistance of, say, 25 knots, and the forecast is calling for 25 knots gusting to 40, written often as 25 G40, you absolutely should not fly. The gusts are well over your limit.
Always respect the gust value, not just the average.
Always. Now, tools. You need to know how to use your weather tools effectively. METARs and TAFs are crucial. Look for that G for gust value after the wind speed.
Like 270Q28KT means wind from 270 degrees at 15 knots, gusting to 28 knots.
Precisely. Learn to read graphical forecasts for aviation, GFAs too. They show forecast turbulence areas using specific symbols. And of course, your own visual sight scan is a critical tool. Identify those obstacles, slopes, hot surfaces. NAV drone is helpful for airspace, but supplement it with real-world ground-level wind awareness.
And for people studying for exams, what kind of wind questions pop up?
Expect judgment-based questions, like the one we just did. The METAR says 2715G28KT, your RPAS limit is 25 kL, should you fly? The answer is clearly no, because the gust exceeds the limit. Also anticipate questions about microclimates and terrain effects. What's a potential hazard when flying near a sun-exposed rooftop at noon? Answer: thermal updrafts and mechanical turbulence. They test your understanding of these localized phenomena.
Okay, good tips. Anything else we should keep in mind about gusts and updrafts? Nuances, maybe?
Yeah, a few important ones. Directional gusts. A gust isn't just stronger wind. The direction can also shift quite suddenly, maybe by 30 or 40 degrees temporarily. This can affect how well your drone holds its position using GPS, mess with return-to-home tracking, and even cause your gimbal to struggle to keep the camera steady.
So it's not just speed, it's direction too.
Right. Another key point. Downdrafts often follow updrafts. Think about it. Warm air rises, cools at altitude, becomes denser, and eventually has to sink back down. This can create dangerous localized downdrafts or sinks, especially near the top or edges of strong thermal columns. So avoid hovering directly above known updraft hotspots for extended periods.
What goes up must come down, sometimes forcefully.
You got it. Remember, the urban heat lag 2 updrafts can persist well after sunset in cities as buildings radiate stored heat. Don't assume it's calm just because it's dark. And those gust fronts from distant storms. They can travel low and fast, sometimes arriving before you see any storm clouds. Keep an eye on METARs from airports upwind, or look for mentions of cumulonimbus clouds, CBs, and TAFs, even if they're far away.
Those terrain wind traps, the wind snakes, they seem particularly tricky.
They are, because they're narrow and often invisible from above until you fly right into them. Wind channeling through valleys, between buildings, or along dense tree lines can create these surprisingly fast ribbons of air.
And relying solely on an anemometer, a wind meter, might be misleading.
It can be, yes. A reading taken at head height might be much lower than the wind just 50 feet up. Handheld meters might not capture the peak gust speeds accurately if they average over a few seconds. And taking a reading right next to a building might show calm conditions due to the wind shadow, completely missing the stronger winds just feet away.
So measure at your intended flight altitude if possible, or at least be aware of the limitations.
Exactly. Also, be aware of invisible air holes, brief moments where lift decreases unexpectedly. These could be microbursts, downdrafts after a thermal passes, or sudden pressure drops. They can cause the drone to sink suddenly. And finally, always keep using nature as your wind intelligence source. Watch the birds. They often avoid hovering out in the open when it's gusty. Notice if the insects seem to vanish, that can mean turbulence is building. Watch for those dust spirals. They clearly indicate thermal activity or mechanical swirling.
It really is striking how much this still comes down to human observation, judgment, and intuition, isn't it? Even with all the sophisticated technology we have on board these drones, is that the real edge for a pilot?
I believe it absolutely is. This whole deep dive isn't just about memorizing technical facts or regulations. It's fundamentally about transforming your mindset as a pilot. You need to learn to think like a meteorologist, but fly like a hawk. Don't just check the forecast. Interpret it in the context of your specific location and the time of day. Look for signs of instability, big temperature dew point spreads, forecasts mentioning CB clouds, falling pressure trends. Ask yourself constantly, where is the air likely moving fastest around here? Where is it likely rising? Where might it be swirling?
So becoming a micro-weather detective for your flight zone.
Exactly. And your risk assessment must include realistic gust margins. Don't plan to fly right at the edge of your drone's stated limits. Maintain at least a 10, maybe 15-kilometer buffer between the maximum forecast gust and your drone's tolerance. If the forecast gusts are already at your drone's limit, the safe decision is usually not to launch.
That buffer is key.
It is. And visual line of sight, VLOS, isn't just a rule to keep the drone in sight. Transport Canada emphasizes VLOS partly because your own eyes are an incredibly valuable wind awareness tool.
How so?
Mid-flight, you can see if the drone is suddenly lifting unexpectedly, or tilting at odd angles, fighting a crosswind, or struggling to maintain altitude. You can see corresponding changes in the trees, flags on the ground, even how birds are flying nearby. VLOS provides real-time feedback on the air mass that sensors alone might miss or lag on. It's a dynamic part of your situational awareness.
That's a great perspective on VLO.
Right.
It's active observation, not just passive watching.
Right. And your fail-safe planning, like setting your return-to-home procedures, needs to account for wind too. Ask yourself, if the wind picks up significantly, does my drone have enough battery power to fight its way back home against that headwind? Where are my Plan B emergency landing zones if RTH isn't viable? Track your battery consumption in relation to the wind drag throughout the flight. Consider the wind direction for your return path, not just the outbound leg.
Wind affects every single phase of flight, doesn't it?
Every single one. There's risk at takeoff. A sudden gust can tip a drone over before it even gets properly airborne. During climb out, an unexpected updraft could push you into restricted airspace if you're near a boundary. During cruise, wind causes drift, makes smooth imaging harder, drains batteries faster. During descent, you can fly into sudden downdrafts. And during landing, crosswind, gusts are probably one of the biggest challenges for safe landings.
And beyond just safety, gusts and updrafts impact the actual mission quality too.
Hugely important point. Even if it's technically safe to fly within limits, strong gusts might mean your video footage is shaky and unusable, or your mapping photos are blurred or misaligned. Updrafts can cause inconsistencies in altitude for mapping missions, leading to distorted data. So sometimes you might need to delay a flight purely for quality reasons, even if it's legally flyable from a safety perspective.
Delivering good data is often the whole point after all.
Exactly. And finally, cultivate that calm, proactive pilot mindset. A lot of crashes happen not just because of the wind itself, but because the pilot panics or over-controls in reaction to it. Try to pre-visualize how gusts or updrafts might affect your drone in different parts of your flight area. Build that mental muscle memory through practice in milder conditions. And when something unexpected happens, pause for just a beat before reacting, if possible.
That mantra you mentioned earlier.
Calm eyes, confident hands, no surprises. Aim for that. Anticipate, don't just react.
Wow, what a journey that was, navigating through all these invisible forces that shape our drone flights. We've covered so much ground from, ancient indigenous wisdom to modern physics and cutting-edge regulations. Hopefully everyone listening feels a bit more equipped now to face these aerial challenges.
I hope so too. Ultimately, this deep dive into wind gusts and updrafts really underscores that understanding risk holistically, considering the physics, the environment, the regulations, the mission needs, is what's paramount. It's not just about ticking boxes legally. It's really about making genuinely smart go-no-go decisions, protecting people and property on the ground, and ultimately delivering reliable, high-quality results consistently on every single flight you undertake.
So the big takeaway for you, the listener, next time you're out there planning a flight, just remember, the wind you feel down here at ground level often isn't the same wind your drone will be flying in a couple of 100 feet up. Always be ready, be looking, be reading those invisible clues the environment offers you, the way the leaves rustle, how distant flags are behaving, the way a bird seems to hang motionless in the air.
Yeah. And perhaps the next time you see a hawk effortlessly soaring, riding some invisible column of rising air, or you just feel that sudden change in the breeze on your cheek as a gust passes, maybe you'll remember some of the powerful lessons about wind awareness we've unpacked today, and think about how they apply directly to the skies your own drone inhabits.
Keep exploring, keep learning, and most importantly, fly safe out there.
That's a wrap on today's mission, Commander. See above, go beyond, get ahead. For more training, tools, and intel, head to skycommander.ca. If you learned something new, share it, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star debrief.